Hello and welcome everybody. We are very lucky to have 4 authors with very different books, and it really shows the range of crime fiction. Lots of things you can do with crime fiction, and these books are all very different from each other. Here I have Kate Hamer, whose book, The Girl in the Red Coat, is a psychological thriller. Next to Kate, we have Adam Croft, whose book is very much a whodunit sort of mystery with an unreliable narrator and a very small cast of characters in a very tight area, and a real puzzle of a book. And Chris Longmuir, with a historical spy crime series set in World War I munitions factory. I'll let them each tell you about those, and when our other author gets here, I'll introduce him as well, if he gets here before the end. So first, Kate, can you just tell us a bit about The Girl in the Red Coat?
The Girl in the Red Coat was published last year. It's kind of a psychological crime thriller. But I think the genre of crime is just fascinating at the moment because it's just becoming so broad, and it takes in everything really. It's based on a relationship of mother and daughter, and in it, Carmel, eight-year-old Carmel, goes missing. It's told in their 2 voices, charts their 2 separate journeys. Really, I read somewhere once that every book about a missing person is a crime novel, but it's also a love story too. And I think that's very true of The Girl in the Red Coat. It's about family and about connection and all sorts of things like that, as well as crime. And the inspiration kind of came. I had a very strong image of a little girl wearing a red coat standing in a forest, and somehow I knew in this image that she was lost. And the journey of the book is really charting why and how this happened. Kind of that I stuck with that very potent image, and it's drawn on lots of other, film like Schindler's List, the image of the little girl in the red coat. There's a film called Don't Look Now that I saw very inappropriately young, about the age of 10, and has never quite left me. And Little Red Riding Hood, of course, so that imagery is all in there in the book, all those influences. So all I would say is that in terms of the plot, it goes in a direction that one might not be expecting it to go.
And we'll talk about that further, especially the characters, because it's really told from the point of view of 2 characters, and I really enjoy the way you got into their heads. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Adam, so your book is very much a whodunit, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a crossover between that and a psychological thriller, I think. Again, involves a missing person, a missing child, and is based around the premise of could you murder your wife to save your daughter? When a young girl gets kidnapped from the driveway in the morning when Dad's putting her in the car to go to school, and later that day he receives a ransom note saying that he can have his daughter back, but he needs to murder his wife first. The book was out initially last December, did very well early this year, and subsequently Amazon bought it through their Thomas and Mercer imprint, and they're re-releasing it next month. So I spent a fair part of the year rewriting it. I've essentially doubled the length of it. It's now from the point of view of the mother and the father, rather than just the father. So we have 2 unreliable narrators, and quite a few changes in it. So it's been an interesting challenge actually revisiting a book that I've already written and essentially writing it again. That's something I've not done before, which is good fun.
It's great. And Chris, it's obvious that you've done a lot of research, and particularly into 2 different things that crop up in the book. One is the first women police officers, So it really charts the very beginning of the first time that there were women police officers. And also the World War I munitions factories, so making things for the army for the fighting. And that was all fascinating, and the research really comes through. So we were talking before this about, I really get the impression that you love the research as much as the writing.
Oh yes, you really get drawn into the research. Devil's Porridge is a murder mystery, but it's got elements of spying, Irish revolutionaries, sabotage, an assassination attempt on King George and Queen Mary, who actually did visit Gretna on the 18th of May in 1917. I don't know how many of you know, but the first women's police service arose from the suffragette organisations. And this made my Kirsty Campbell, who is the main character, a really fascinating character, because in their training, they were trained in jiu-jitsu and all different things, things that you wouldn't associate with women in 1917. The women police were set up in 1914, but in 1917, the Ministry of Munitions employed them to patrol the munitions factories. And Gretna was the largest munitions factory in Britain. It was 9 miles long and 2 miles wide, and it was spread out. And the Devil's Porridge of the book, which is Devil's Porridge is actually gun cotton and nitroglycerine. And the munitionettes, they kneaded this with their hands in lead tubs. The lead tubs were soldered with lead, because if they soldered them with metal, they would explode. So these girls had to mix this explosive substance in these tubs. They mixed it together, and then it went off to make the cordite. So it was Conan Doyle who coined the name Devil's Porridge. He did an article for the Annandale Observer in 1916, and he commented on the munitionettes mixing their Devil's Porridge. So that's where Devil's Porridge came from. But at heart, it's a murder mystery, and it's quite different from my contemporary murder mysteries, because I write them as well. But I just find these women so fascinating. There's so much about them, so much in their background. It really they make fantastic characters.
And your book starts with an explosion at a munitions factory,
yes,
not
in
far
London.
from here.
The Silvertown explosion, it was on, let me see, I think it was the 17th of January 1917. It was middle of January anyway, 1917. And the Silvertown factory manufactured TNT. I can never get my mouth around the word trinitrotoluene. But I had to spell it out in the first chapter, and it's TNT. So they were employed with that. Now, at the time the explosion occurred, there were a lot of kind of rumours around. It actually happened. There were a lot of rumours around about Zeppelins or sabotage, but at the end of the day it was decided it was a pure accident. Of course, it's not a pure accident in my book. It's sabotage. But it practically flattened Silvertown completely. When the factory exploded, there were great lumps of metal, red hot metal thrown into the air, and one of them was thrown right across the Greenwich Peninsula, is that right? Mm-hmm. And it landed on a gas cylinder, whatever you call them, and it went up as well. Now that's virtually where the Millennium Dome is now. But I mean, so I had them all in Silvertown, and then I had to transport them all to Gretna. And I was saying at the I got them all to the station, because you can't have them in London one day and in Gretna the next. I mean, it's half a country away. So I really had to take them there through Euston Station, and I got into this station and I could not get out of the damn place. Another writer phoned me in the middle, "How are you getting on with the book?" "I'm stuck in the station, I can't get out of the station." But I eventually got out and managed to finish the book. But it's,
Yeah.
there's a lot in it, a lot of subplots.
And a lot of characters, and you have two characters, really. I mean, there are other people who you see through the eyes of the two main characters. But I love how you describe that as a love story, because it is a love story between two people who are separated from each other for almost the entire book, and they don't know the experiences the other ones are having. How did you go about putting yourself in their place, imagining the worlds that they're living in, sort of imagining, what they had to deal with?
I think it came through character more than anything else. It's all the motivation is through character, and I've got children myself. I probably couldn't have written it when they were small. So I am a mother, so I've got that perspective. But it's a kind of that thing of the fact that they're separated and they're sort of communicating across the pages almost, because they have alternate chapters, and it kind of went from there. But it's definitely, everything that happens comes through character, really. I would say that's my starting point.
Yeah. And you said about having children, and to me, I've got 3 young children. It's a subject I probably wouldn't have gone for reading, but I absolutely loved it because I really think you picked up on what, especially the 8-year-old girl Carmel, the way she thinks. She's not a straightforward 8-year-old, but the way she thinks is the way that really is the way children thinks, and her world changes as she goes off on the journey that she goes off on. And the other thing that I appreciate, and I'm not trying not to give too much away here, but to some degree the peril goes away. And I think that's what really drew me into the book, that it became about these characters and the journeys that they go on. And I love that. Adam, yours is about a child abduction as well. But it's handled in a very different sort of way. I think it's more about the parents.
It is, yeah.
And when I first listened to the audiobook of Adam's book, Her Last Tomorrow, and it just had the father narrator throughout. And then I looked at the ebook and I noticed that there are alternate chapters as well with the mother in the ebook, and realized that that's a different version of the book. Can you tell us how you went about that?
Yeah, that's the version that's out next month, the Thomas and Mercer edition. It was an interesting process because it was all in the first person, written from the father, Nick's point of view, and I'd only ever seen the story through his eyes and known how it affected him, how he saw it, the views he had on things. So to write it from the mother's point of view as well, she's got a very different personality. She sees the same situation in a different way to him, almost as if different things are happening. It's quite interesting seeing 2 different viewpoints on the same situation, and especially writing first person from a female character's point of view, a character that's so different from me in every way. It was really interesting, and kind of retelling the same story. And again, like you were saying about Kate, it chops and changes between the 2 the whole way through. So you're seeing the same story being told almost twice in rotating chapters, but from totally different points of view and with a totally different spin on them.
And neither of them are particularly reliable.
No.
You can't particularly trust either. You find out things throughout the book that are surprising and make you rethink what you've seen before. And it turns the book into a real puzzle, I found.
Yeah.
And to the end, and you're trying to guess that twist. It's that sort of book where you're really trying to guess that what happens throughout. The reader, in your book, the reader knows what happens, because you see both characters' points of view, but they don't know what happened. They don't know what the other one's experiencing. And Adam, in your book, the characters don't know what's going on. They both have different things happening with them. And Chris, you've got lots of characters, all with different agendas. And you were mentioning the train station. I absolutely loved the scene in the train station and with them getting on the train, because there's different people following different people. Everybody has their own agenda. How do you keep those agendas? How do you keep track of all that's going on?
It's quite difficult. It was quite a complex book to write. It actually took me 2 years to write, and it was only published at the beginning of this month. I have to get into the head of each character, and each set of characters, of course, as you said, they all have their own agenda. The station scene I wrote, and as I say, I couldn't get out of it for a while, but after the book was finished, I had to go back and look at the structure of those station scenes And the order in which they were written was not the order in which it was eventually published, because I moved the scenes to try to fit the time scales, because the time scales were crossing over. You know, as one person was, you know, as leaving, another was arriving, but they were actually on the train. So I really had to do an awful lot of work in trying to, you know, make that fit. And I think it worked. I mean, you've read it. You think it worked? Yeah. So that was quite difficult. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is, as I said, it is a murder mystery, and the main character is Kirsty Campbell, who is the WPC, who had been previously a suffragette, who knows jiu-jitsu. And she teams up with a Belgian refugee. And I've taken this Belgian refugee from Belgium in 1914. You know, I've given one chapter kind of bringing her from Belgium, escaping from Belgium, separating from her family. She doesn't know what's happened to her family. She comes to Britain, she's on her own. She's recruited by MI6, and Kell and, oh God, I've forgotten his name. They're both real characters. And they recruit her for MI6, and they send her to Gretna on a spying mission, but she's never spied before. You know, she's been doing interpretation work. And she gets there and she doesn't know what the heck she's doing, and she thinks she's the worst spy in history. But she teams up with Kirsty, and they try to protect this young munitionette, Sally, who has witnessed the murderer escaping from the Silvertown explosion, and the murderer is in Gretna as well at this point. And the murderer knows that Sally has recognised him. So basically they're trying to protect Sally during this procedure. So they team up together and they're trying to solve this murder.
Kate, do you consider yourself a crime writer?
I think it's, as I was saying earlier, I think it's such a broad spectrum now. I kind of do, but I came across an article recently where the book was actually mentioned in the Guardian article, and it was about a genre called griplit, which is a really interesting sort of kind of the Harry Potter generation, a bit broader than crime maybe. So, you know, things like Girl in a Train could be categorised as griplit as well as crime literature. And actually, it kind of liberated me slightly reading this article, because I thought, you know, that's I can relate to that. So yes and no.
I mean, are you working on something else? Are you
I've just finished. I'm just doing the copy edits on my next book, which is coming out in February, which has got a very crimey title, actually, called The Dole Funeral. And it's kind of like a dark coming-of-age book, I would say, about family secrets. So I'm just...
So maybe another crime, not quite crime,
yeah,
sort of. Yeah,
just drawn to writing dark for some reason. I've no idea why. I'm really happy, actually, but I just write dark.
Adam, so your Her Last Tomorrow is a one-off. You've written series before that, is that right? So what was your series before?
I've got 2 series out.
Okay.
I've got Night and Culverhouse crime thrillers. There's 5 in that at the moment, or 5.5, working on the next one. There's 4 Kempston Hardwick mysteries as well, which are sort of traditional English murder mystery in the modern day, but very much kind of golden age style. And the other ones are more urban town crime thrillers, sort of what I'd call standard British crime. Yeah, also doing a lot more standalones now for Thomas and Mercer. I've got another one coming out 1st of March. And plans for at least 2 more after that they've seen and liked. So, yeah, lots to be getting on with. Yeah,
great. And Chris, so your Devil's Porridge, which I should have held up before, I will hold it up so everybody can see what it looks like, and you now know what Devil's Porridge is. But Chris, so this was your second book. In the Kirsty Campbell mysteries, but it's actually a prequel to the first book.
Yes. The first book in the series, The Death Game, takes place in 1919, and it was based in Dundee. Most of my crime novels are based in Dundee. Devil's Porridge is the only one which is not based in Dundee. And I set Kirsty Campbell in Dundee as the first policewoman in the Dundee police force. And at that time, in reality, there were only 2 policewomen in the whole of Scotland. At the time I set Devil's Porridge, there were 157 policewomen at Gretna. So I just got fascinated with this character. So basically, Devil's Porridge is a prequel to the Death Game, and they can be read in any order. I would think.
Yeah. I mean, certainly reading this, I wouldn't have known that there was another book. I mean, it works perfectly well as a standalone book. So what are you working on next? Are you doing another Kirsty?
Well, I toyed with whether to do another contemporary or another historical, because I've got readers crying out for both. And I decided to do another Kirsty novel, a historical. And it's based, I've taken her back to Dundee. It's back in 1919 again, and it's called Bloody Murder. So I'm hoping to have her up to all sorts. I'm only about 4 or 5 chapters in, so it's early days, and I am not a writer who plots. I don't have the whole thing in my mind when I start. I work from a scene and I build it from there. So I don't know what's going to happen in the book any more than the reader does when they're reading it. And I always think if I don't know what's going to happen, the reader's not going to know what's going to happen.
And I mentioned your research before. I mean, how do you go about your research? Do you go into a library? Is it mostly done on the internet?
Yes, I use libraries, I use archives. Devil's Porridge, I found a great thesis online called Timbertown Girls, written by a guy called Chris Braden. It's never been published, but I found it online, so of course I downloaded it and plundered it to my will. And there's another author, Gordon Rutledge, who wrote about Gretna. They're very slim books, and you can pick them up. There is a Devil's Porridge museum at Gretna, Gretna the town. People get confused with Gretna and Gretna Green. Gretna Green is a mile further north than Gretna. Gretna the town was not there at the start of the First World War. Gretna Green was, but Gretna wasn't. It was a completely new town, and it was built on a military grid, you know, not like our towns with the streets going all different directions. Military grid. Yeah. And they were all timber to begin with, and then they started to build stone buildings because the timber got too expensive because the war was on, they couldn't bring it in.
Adam, the father in your book is a writer. And he makes several times throughout the book, he's being watched by the police, and he makes references to the fact that he needs to look up how to do a murder, how to plan a murder, but he can't look it up on the internet. But he's used to looking up these sorts of things, on the internet and trying to plot out how to do the perfect murder. Is that how you go about it? How do you think through?
I'm fairly sure that with my internet search history, I must be on some sort of watch list somewhere. The things I have to look up and read about and find out about. But yeah, I do a lot of speaking to police officers, a lot of CID detectives, retired and current, who help me out quite a lot with fact checking and things like that when that's needed. For Her Last Tomorrow it was a bit different. The psychological thrillers I really like because they don't need so much on the research side of things, because it's normal people in normal situations, turn it upside down and see what happens. So it's, again, I suppose making a writer was a little bit giving me less work to do, because that's the world I know, and a little bit of, as you say, him having a natural method of thinking, okay, I might have a way out of this, but that way also being a problem, because, like you say, the police are watching him, are monitoring him, and he can't do what he would normally do to get out of that situation.
Kate, so you've got two main characters, a mother and an eight-year-old girl, and you see the entire book is told through their eyes. The experience of the mother losing her daughter, and having to go through that process of grief and not knowing whether she's alive, where she is, whether she's safe. Is that something that you can research at all? I mean, was there something from real life that you put into that, or did you imagine?
It's an interesting one, actually. I kind of made a conscious decision right at the beginning of the writing process that I wasn't going to research it, and I didn't want to research real life stories and real life cases. And for a couple of reasons, really. It was partly because I wanted very much to be their story, Beth and Carmel's story. And also a kind of respect, I think, you know, not just taking news stories and reworking them, you know, other people's lives. But no, interesting talking about plotting as well, because that's there's advantages and disadvantages, I know, to both methods. And I know some people sort of plot out on spreadsheets and every scene and every arc and everything, you know. And I don't do that. I seem to have this method of writing the beginning, writing the first chapter or the first couple of chapters, and then very quickly writing the last couple of paragraphs. So I know where I'm going, and maybe sort of 2 or 3 big arcs of how to get there. But I think I'd get really bored if I plotted out sort of minutely.
Yeah.
I think I would feel I'd written the book already and wouldn't want to do any more work on it. The mother goes through this process with the police, where she's got a couple of police officers who come and help her get through the process that she's going through. That is made up, is presumably as well. I mean, you didn't look into. No, I know that's a sort of standard
way that they go
procedure. Yeah. But it's more that I didn't sort of. I didn't look at newspaper reports or anything, you know.
I can imagine
kind
it'd
of
be
real,
quite difficult
yeah,
to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
In Carmel, so an 8-year-old girl, you're seeing the world through this 8-year-old's eyes, and you know things change in ways that she's told that they change. You know, she's not like an adult where she can make decisions that an adult does. The decisions are largely made for her, and I think you really captured that sort of point of view where everything's very narrow. You can only see what she sees and experience what she experiences, and the the conflict that arises really is the reader only sees through her point of view. I mean, were you able to kind of imagine that in terms of thinking about what you were like when you were 8 years old, how you would think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I sort of feel quite strongly that, and I remember being that age very much and having very definite sort of thoughts and ideas and making judgments about people. Carmel's quite judgy. I think I was probably quite judgy as well. And definitely, I remember I haven't lost the experience of being that age, I don't think, and seeing from an 8-year-old's eyes. And I wanted to write a child who, did have an inner life herself and her own thoughts and feelings, and not a child narrator that kind of, was a sort of childish babbling figure or anything like that. So yeah, she's definitely a strong character in her own right.
Mm-hmm. Have you brought an object or a picture of an object with you? Have any of you done that?
I have, yes.
Might not have had a chance.
Yeah, it's in my bag.
I could take
actually,
a writing tip if you haven't. Adam.
Yeah, well, I was asked to bring in either an object or a picture of an object that represents my kind of writing or my method of writing, and I got thinking about what inspires you to write, because I'm very much down the line of it's my job. I get up, I'm at my desk at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I write through the day. But so at the moment, something that's on the right page, something that's been inspiring me to get up and write is this. You probably won't be able to see it, but my first child due early next year.
If you can't see it, it's a scan.
It's a scan, yeah. It's my first child due
baby
early next year, which that's the kind of thing that will drive you on and make you keep writing. Because I'm very much a believer that you have to just sit down and get on with it. A lot of us, we make excuses sometimes about how we're don't feel inspired to sit down and write. And I don't think you can do that in any other job. I think if you're a builder, you can't say, you know what, I don't fancy building a wall today, or I don't, you know, I don't really feel I'm in the right frame of mind to serve people in Tesco's. You know, you go to work and you do it. And I think for me, I treat it as a job, as a business, and that's important to me. Really, I don't you know, worry about inspiration and things. My inspiration comes from bills landing on my doormat.
In the book, there's some there's some disagreement between the husband and wife about their jobs, where they don't necessarily respect each other's jobs. And Nick's wife, Tasha, doesn't necessarily think he works all day. You know, it's that kind of impression. If you're working from home, you can't really be working. And at the same time, she goes off. You know, she's a bit of a suit, a corporate suit, and he kind of doesn't really respect that. So I think there's that conflict there.
They're very different people, yeah.
Chris, have you got yours?
Well, I forgot to put it in the case, so you'll have to look at it the picture from my website. This is the Dundee International Book Prize trophy. It's glass, crystal, I'm not sure what it's made of, but it's rather nice. And it goes with this book. And I brought that because this was my breakthrough into publishing. When I won that, it led to a publishing deal for Deadwood, and it also led to a lovely, great big cash prize. Whisper it, 10,000 quid. And I did the Orient Express the following year, there and back in Venice. On the basis of that, took most of it, but it was worth it. You know, it was fun money. So I'm really proud of that, and I meant to put it in my suitcase, but maybe it would have got broken anyway. So you'll just have to see it online. It's on my website under Books Awards.
And Kate.
Well, I racked my brains about what to bring, and I don't really sort of, apart from my glasses and my computer, that's what I need to write. There's nothing that I desperately need to have around me, like special teddy bears or anything like that. But I bought this bottle of Guerlain perfume because, is anybody allergic? I want to sort of, sorry. It's quite strong, actually.
I'm going to go around smelling of this all day.
Yeah, I want to remember always, and this is what I remind myself, to write with the senses, very much so, and whether that is really strong, sorry. Whether it's smell or taste or touch, and not to forget that, because I think as writers, and you know, you might say the same, you can forget to put down what's in your head, forget to put it on the page because you think people know by some weird psychic combustion. I don't know, but remember, you know, all of that, put the experience of feel and taste and touch and sight and everything down on the page, so that can be, the experience is communicated to your reader. Because sometimes, I mean, my husband's my first reader, and sometimes he'll say, "You've done it again." You'll forget. You think your reader's psychic. You've got to, you know, don't forget to. I'm not feeling what's happening here. You've got to put it down on the page, and so I try. This is a reminder to me to try and remember always to put it down on the page.
That's interesting because Carmel, the girl, is often remembering her mother. And it's not just through images that she remembers her. It's through things like smell and touch as well. And so that's interesting. That's a good piece of writing advice there. We've got to maybe have a couple minutes for a couple of quick questions if anybody has any. Anybody has any questions you'd like to ask?
Yeah, you were mentioning about genres earlier. Do you consciously think about that when you're writing something, about what genre am I writing this time, or actually just...
I suppose I do, because I plan quite heavily and plot everything else. I think I know quite early on what sort of style it's going to be. Again, with the two series, it's quite obvious there they are what they are. The genres are set quite early on, so I know the styles of those when I'm writing them. For a new book that's not in a series, it can be a little bit trickier to know, but yeah, because I plan quite heavily, it becomes quite apparent quite early on.
Chris?
I think I always know I'm writing the crime genre because I always have a murder of some sort or murders. But I don't particularly stick to a specific genre to write. I mean, my first book was a historical saga, which might fit more into the kind of dark romance. But I don't write romance in general. So I write historical, crime, and contemporary crime, but they're definitely crime. The mystery suspense type crime. It's kind of a cross between a thriller and the puzzle aspect, because I usually have the puzzle in it, you know, in terms of who did it, who done it, but it's also combined with a more thriller type action book.
Kate?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, this griplit sort of has kind of slightly liberated me. If I chose one kind of genre though, or one word, I think noir would probably sum it up.
Okay, great. I think we have to stop here.
I've got a message from Leo which I'd like to relay. Poor guy, he thinks he had a sort of Alice through the looking glass experience. That trying to get here, whatever happened, he was ending up back at Victoria, and eventually he just gave up. But I would like just to tell you a little bit about him and about his book, because I think it's such an amazing book. He's a Nigerian author living here, and his book is called Easy Motion Tourist, and it's set in Nigeria. It's a thriller of sort of innocent abroad getting mixed up in a murder that involves him in sex workers in Lagos. And there's a fantastic sort of origin story behind the book. And I've told him that I'm going to do an interview with him for Words with Jam, which many of you will know, to make up for the fact that he couldn't come here today. So I'm so disappointed. I think he's an amazing author with a really interesting story.
I mean, and can I just second that, because it really is. Easy Motion Tourist is the name of the book, and it really struck me because it's about sex workers, and it's about humanizing and dehumanizing people. You know, they become victims, and the main character in the book is a remarkable woman who kind of works her way through people to get to the top of the chain of people who are abducting, who are taking these sex workers and murdering them. It's a remarkable main character, and I know that there was this interesting story about how he came up with this character. So look out for that in the journal, because it's well worth reading.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.